I'm Julie Herman of Jaybird Quilts and Lazy Girl Designs, and welcome back to the Lily Sew Along. In this video, we are going to create the front cover and the front lining. Let's get started. Currently, we have our two front cover pieces, and the first thing we need to do is transfer our markings onto them before we sew them together. On your printed template, you'll see that there are 3 lines for each of our pleats. I find it easiest to line up the edge of my template with the edge of my fabric and lightly mark the dart lines on my piece. Directions for what we are doing are on page 4 of the printed pattern and page 6 if you are using the PDF pattern. Flip the pattern piece over and make the marks on the left side as well. The next step is to make the 3 lines for our dart. And here you have 2 options. You can poke a hole in your template so that you know where to make the lines meet, mark the 3 lines at the ends, and then draw the lines. What I find works best for me is that I cut the small triangle out of my template, and then I like to line up my template and draw these 2 outside lines. I don't draw the middle line with this method. After making all of those markings, we're going to head to the machine and sew these 2 together with a 1/4 inch seam and press to the left piece. I've gone ahead and sewn my seam and pressed it to the left, and now I have this front cover piece. The next step is to cut out my lining, and I did that in the same method as I cut my back lining. So I just took this on top of the full piece, pinned it together, and cut around it. Then you need to transfer the markings that we've made on this piece onto this piece. And I find it easiest to do that by flipping this piece over and this piece over and centering them and leaving about a 1/4 inch, and then just drawing all of these lines vertically to continue them. And then for the bottom, I find it best to use my template. Your center won't line up with anything since you don't have a seam here, but you'll be able to line up your top, your side, and your bottom and draw your lines and your lines. Then once you have all of those drawn, it's time to begin to make our darts. Directions for how to do this are on page 5 if you have the printed pattern and page 7 if you are working from the PDF pattern. I'm going to show you my method. So my method is a little bit different, and I like to start on the back, and I like to take pins along the lines that I drew, and they will help me be visual cues to me for the next step. So I'm simply just going to put them directly on top of the drawn lines. Okay, then I'm going to flip it back over, and I am now going to follow the directions. So I'm going to take this flat side and fold it to the bottom, but by having these pins, what it'll do is I want both of my pins to be directly on top of each other. That's how I know that I'm in exactly the right place, because you could be a little too far over one way or the other. But if those pins are exactly on top of each other, then you know you're in the right place. So then I'm just going to take a 3rd pin and pin the dart. And once I've confirmed that I've went through both layers, I can remove these 2 pins. And I'm just going to push that to the side and then repeat the process with this side. So I'm just going to pull this over towards the bottom and line up those pins directly on top of each other. And then take one more pin to pin all the layers together. And I'm going to repeat that process with my lining, and then head over to the machine to sew directly on that line, no cutting needed. I'm at my machine, and I'm simply going to sew from the fold to my raw edges, and I'm going to backstitch at the beginning and the end. I'm going to take my pin out, never want to sew over pins. Now that I'm at the end, I'm going to backstitch. And there we go. One very nice dart. Looks great from the other side. And I'm going to repeat that process with this second dart as well as the 2 darts on my lining cover piece. Now that we have made our darts, it's time to make our pleats. Directions for making the pleats are on page 10 of the printed pattern, page 8 of the PDF pattern. So flip your piece over and you should have 4 sets of 3 marks each. And the middle one is our fold and the outer 2 are what we're going to call our pin lines. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the front and we're going to begin with this set of 3. And we're going to fold on the middle line. So there we go, fold on the middle line. And then we're going to pin through where this line is. So pin through where the pin lines are. So if you look on the other side, it should be approximately that they line up with each other. There we go. Then we are going to fold this back tight into the pin. So now we have about a 1/2 inch right there. And then we're going to take one more pin to hold this in place. And this pin is going to go through all 3 layers of fabric. And that's what it's going to look like. Then we're going to repeat for the next one. So we're going to fold at the middle. And then we're going to pin where our mark is. Double check on the back. Yep, that we're lined up on our other mark. Then we're going to pull back over, tight to that pin. And take another pin to pin through all 3 layers. So the first half of our pleats are done, and that's what it looks like. And now we're going to do the reverse for this side. So we'll begin by folding to the middle. We're going to take a pin, put it in where that line is. Double check that it's in the right place and open that back up. Put a pin in to hold all 3 layers. And then to do our last one, again, fold on the middle line. Put a pin in here. Check on the back. Oh, that one didn't line up perfectly. Always best to double check now. And then if things for some reason really don't line up, you could always go back to your template and reference your pieces to make sure that your marks are correct. It's kind of the measure twice, cut once. You'd rather double check everything now. And then fold back on that pin line and put in our last pin. And at this point we have 8 pins, which is a lot. We're going to repeat this same process with our lining piece. And then once that is taken care of on both of ours, we'll head over to the machine to baste this in place. I'm at my machine, and now it is time to baste along the top here. So I'm simply going to start a little bit before my first 2 pins. And I am about 1/8 of an inch from my raw edge, so that all of this will be eventually caught in my seam allowance when I add my waistband. And I'm going to remove my pins as I go. Never want to sew over pins. Nice and slow, sew from one pleat to the next. A stiletto can be helpful here to hold the pleats in place. I really like this one from Annie. It's got a nice wooden handle and a sharp point. As I mentioned, just go nice and slow, no rush. And now we're going to repeat that with our lining. We've now created the outside front and the front lining. In the next video, we're going to go ahead and add waistbands to the top of our front pieces and to the top of our back pieces. And then we'll also add our fastener, either hook and loop, or I'll show you a magnetic option as well. Please be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss any of the videos in the sew along. If you haven't already signed up to receive the sew along emails, you can do that in the caption below. See you soon.